Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Rich Artist Fridays. Yay, another Friday. Honestly, best day of the week, especially because today we're doing story time. So this one's not going to be as tactical as we did last week. Hi to everybody in the Instagram Live too. So if you just want to like chill with me, it's the end of the week, like grab tea, grab coffee, like use this as your time to just sort of play a little bit fly on the wall from my experiences. For anybody that's new here that has never participated in the Rich Artist Fridays, my name is Sophie. I'm a fashion and beauty photographer based in New York City. I founded the Rich Artist program because I wanted to counteract this starving artist stigma, but I'm not just talking about money, which obviously, yes, I want you guys to be rich, abundant in resources in order to buy yourself time to be creative, have a backbone that gives you peace of mind in order to be spontaneous and be creative and be true artists. But I also want you guys to be rich in knowledge and tactics of how to view yourself as an entrepreneur or how to build a strong business. Because when I graduated college with a degree in photography, and then I was assisting and digiteching, and then ultimately, freelancing myself, I never had somebody that sat me down and was like, this is how you run a successful business off of your art. This is how you attract clients. This is how you do outreach. This is the kind of time that is worth investing when you do sit down in front of your computer and you're, trying to propel a business forward. And I watch so many artists either become extremely dependent on agents or managers to do this for them, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I want to empower you guys to understand that where your career goes and the opportunities that you draw in is within your own hands and it's in your own control, and that you guys are more than qualified and capable of doing this yourself, but you need to learn how. I needed to learn how. I needed to hire my own business coaches to teach me how to do this. And I needed to have a lot of trial and error to figure out what works for me. How can I truly connect to people? How can I build lasting relationships with brands that I'm excited to work with? And I think it's a shame that us artists don't have more resources and more connections and more community to learn these sort of things and to connect over. So that's why I founded the Rich Artist Fridays and the Rich Artist program. So the Rich Artist Fridays is our 30-minute quickies on a Friday where we just, either I do story times about some experiences I've had, or we do quick tactical things like how do I talk to a client, or how do I leave a lasting impression, or how do I build a relationship? Hi, I see you in the comments. I love when you guys say hi to me. And then on the other hand, also, how can I feel empowered in running a successful business as well as view myself as an artist? I had a problem with that in the beginning because I was like, if I sit down and I become too like marketing focused or whatever, then I'm not a true artist anymore. Or if only I'm good enough of an artist, then all the jobs and all the money, it will just all sort of magically show up, which, spoiler alert, is never the case. I've worked for several extremely successful photographers that were at the top of the industry and that would rake in like millions a year. And yet, yes, they were good artists, but they were exceptional business people. So I want you guys to get a glimpse at how you can start wrapping your mind around that, how you can start looking into feeling empowered in running a successful business in order to create the opportunities that you really want. Like, what brands do you want to be working with? What sort of campaigns do you want to be shooting? Or, for example, what sort of roster of private clients do you want to be working with? Whatever that looks like for you, there is a way, but there is no like rule book. We're not doctors. We don't just like show up for 8 years at school and then boom, there's our career. There's so many different ways of approaching it, and each one is going to be unique to you. So I want to empower you guys to just take take what has worked for me and then make it your own, try yourself out, and that okay, I'm gonna leave it there because that was a really long intro. But for anybody that's new here, I wanted you guys to understand what this is for. We do workshops as well, and I also do one-on-one coaching. So if you want a free consultation, hit me up, slide into my DMs, or go on my website. There's more information about some of the workshops that we've done. But this is Rich Artist Fridays, which is just for you guys to just take it all in. And last week we did something really tactical. So this week I thought we'd sort of interrupt the like how to land a client sort of mm, thing, and talk about something that's a little bit more fun, which is how I shot my first ever global beauty campaign. So a campaign for a brand that was $1 billion brand, and the images ended up being shown in stores worldwide. Like I'm talking like India and China and Europe and like worldwide. This was a brand that like I grew up as a teenager, when you like hang out in malls when you're in middle school, every single mall in Germany had one of these stores, and every single mall here in the US had one of these stores. It used to be one of those stores that like you would always go into. So how did I land that job? I shot that campaign in 2020, which was the first year that I ever started doing global campaigns, and I had just shot my first ever commercial campaign. Like I shot that in, I believe, January or February of 2020. And literally within 24 hours of me shooting that campaign, I got a call from a producer in Minneapolis who got instructed by a marketing company that got hired by this $1 billion brand to inquire about my rates. So there's this beauty brand that they do like lotions and fragrances and like body care, and also like face care products. And they've been around for like for forever. And they had hired a marketing company to rebrand their brand with the release of a new product line. So they were coming out with a new product line for face care stuff. And the campaign that they were shooting around it was also going to be used to sort of rebrand the brand, because their image was like hadn't changed in a long time, and they were trying to stay relevant, speak to a younger crowd. Um, and that marketing company then hired a production company who it was their job to sort of bring artists on board. Now, I'm not 100% sure how I got thrown in the mix, because at that time I didn't have an agent yet. Like I said, I had literally just shot my first ever commercial campaign for another big brand, like a hair care brand. Um, I think the producer once said that one of the girls that was working on the marketing team was a big fan of We Speak Models, who is the modeling agency that I have worked with for years here in New York City and that I'm also signed to myself. And they were sort of growing very quickly, and their visibility was growing really quickly. And I was shooting all of their tests. I was friends with lots of the models that are signed to that agency. So that relationship to that agency has gotten me, I think, a lot of connections like on the back end. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's sort of how this woman at the marketing agency had found my page on Instagram. Just goes to show how much like networking and a visual presence online can be of help. But then at the same time, when this producer called me, he was like, "Oh, we know you shoot at this studio, this very popular studio chain in New York City a lot." Mind you, the day prior was the first time I had ever shot at that studio chain. And he's like, "We're looking at producing this in the summer in New York City. Is there any other studios that you like working at?" So my assumption is that working at one of these like big name studios also sort of makes the rounds very quickly. He was in Minneapolis. Not only like 24 hours prior had I shot at that studio in New York City for the first time ever. So make of it what you will. Sola saying, "I'm loving the story already, and we haven't even gotten to the good part yet." I know. Love these story time rich artist Fridays. Okay, I'm so excited. Yeah, I feel like we're at the bottom of a hill, and like we haven't even gotten a 20th of the way there for this story. So this guy calls me, and he's like basically giving me a rough rundown of what this production is going to look like. And he was like, I think he asked me if I had time for a call with some of the people from the marketing agency. And I don't know if he asked me for an estimate right away, but it was sort of heading in that direction. So I believe I had a call with the people from the marketing agency, and they sort of like sat me down and ran me through the creative deck of what this campaign was going to look like how many models we were going to be shooting, if there was going to be a pre-light day. And I was asking like all of the questions to sort of gauge how much I should ask to do this job. And the interesting part of this job was that we were doing a beauty campaign, which was stills. Then there was going to be video and product still life. So they were hiring not just me, they were hiring two other artists. So they were looking to hire me for the beauty stills. They were looking to hire a guy for videography and then a guy for still life. And they wanted me to take the creative lead on on the whole campaign because the stills were sort of going to be like the main marketing asset for this release, and then the other two things were going to be accompanying it, where like the still life photographer was shooting the product and then the product was going to be like superimposed also onto the stills. So it was going to be like a beauty still and then like a slogan, like a marketing slogan, and then like the label of the brand, and then like, you know, when you see the actual product on the campaign image, that's what the campaign was going to look like. And they showed me the creative deck, and they had, trying to remember, they had like one or two of my own images from like Instagram or my website in the creative deck. And it was like, I remember it was like right there in the center. And then there was like other photos from other photographers that were sort of in the similar vibe, like around it. And I took that as a really good sign because I was like, well, if they like loved that one or two specific images, and that was like the exact aesthetic that they wanted the campaign to be shot in, and it was my own image. So like obviously for a brand, it makes sense to just hire the artist that created the image in the first place because you know that they know how they did it and they can recreate it for them. And then they asked me to send in an estimate. This part is a little bit blurry for me because I'm trying to remember like step by step how it went. But I guess at some point I wrote them an estimate. I'm trying to debate if I should talk numbers. Is that interesting to you guys? Do you guys want to know like how much money I asked for? I know the answer is yes. Um, well, I guess I might as well. So I think I wrote them an estimate for about $55,000 just for my crew and my own rate and the usage of the images. What's pre-light day? Pre-light day is basically you get a day in the studio to just set up and test the light before the actual shoot day. So like you're in there with your crew, but you're not in there with the models. So you're getting paid for it, and then your assistants are also getting paid to be there. And yes, definitely spill the tea. Okay, so I wrote them an estimate for what I believe was like $55,000, which, mind you guys, is not what I purely walk away with. It's like everything, that all the expenses that it would cost to produce this. And at that time, we were still planning to produce it in New York City. So I wrote New York City rates as well for myself and for my assistants. We ended up shooting it in Minneapolis. So the rates shifted a little bit because we ended up hiring some locals. But I believe this, I think the first call I still had when I was still in New York City, which was February 2020. You guys know where this story is going because we all know what happened in 2020. So we ended up shooting this thing in, oh, sorry guys. I always forget to disconnect you guys from my Wi-Fi, so my connection is bad sometimes. I hope you guys can still hear me. So we ended up shooting this campaign in June, yeah, in June 2020. So from February till June, I was on calls and creative calls, I'd say every week, if not every other week, with like planning this thing. So we're like, I know it sounds ridiculous to say that, like, I think in the end I ended up making like $26,000 or something off of this job. To be like, oh, you worked for 2 days. Well, it ended up having 2 travel days as well. So like 4 days, that much money. No, it's like I had put in months of work up until I got to actually do the thing, which was also very new to me, to have such a long progression till the day where you actually get to do the thing. So like nerves are definitely a part of it. I'm gonna see what you guys are saying because I saw you guys write more comments. What's a pre-light day? A whole day beforehand to decide lighting. Yes, sometimes you get a half a pre-light day, sometimes you get a full pre-light day. Depends a little bit on the budget. And obviously, mind you, like you get paid for that time as well. So we obviously then the pandemic happened, so we ended up the shoot ended up not being in New York City because New York City was such a hot spot and such a like a critical location at the time of the first year of the pandemic, so it got moved into Minneapolis, which so then all of a sudden I was looking at my first ever travel job as well, which was really exciting, also really scary, you know. I ended up getting a budget approved where I got to bring my first assistant with me from New York City, which was a game changer because I'd worked with him for years prior and he knew me better than anybody. He knew exactly my style of working. And like he was also one of my best friends. So I got to travel with him, which was amazing. It was also my first time ever flying business class, which I know to some of you guys might not be a big deal because it's like an hour and a half flight, but like I have never flown business class and the producer ended up booking us, whoops, sorry, ended up booking us business class tickets. And so I felt so bougie. I was like, oh, and like the most generic hotel as well, but like just getting to stay in a hotel for a job is just like everything about it was exciting and scary at the same time for me. But um I remember like I had obviously written them an estimate, but then there came a time where like we were actually going to talk budget, like the budget that I was going to get approved for. Um, that was a scary phone call because like I had had so many phone calls with this producer, but then I knew that this phone call was coming up where it wasn't just going to be like creative talk. It was going to be like get on the phone and negotiate your rate because they ended up wanting to pay me. I forget the numbers, guys, but I think originally the client wanted to pay about half of what I was asking for, and I ended up getting them to a point where they almost doubled their budget for me. Like I to this day I'm like impressed with myself. I remember before getting on this call, I desperately Googled how to negotiate your rates and I watched this like 10-minute video on YouTube of this guy saying like become aware of where your actual worth lies. Because I was like, the other two creatives that they were hiring, guys, they were like in their 40s or their 50s. They had been doing their career for like 20, 30 years. And here I come along. I was 25 years old at the time, you guys. Was I 25 in 2020? I was about to turn 25. Um, that is so crazy. Um, I like before I got on this call, I was like, who am I to ask for this ridiculous amount of money? Like I had never written a number that high on anything ever before. But then I sort of thought about it. I was like, wait, this brand is rebranding to stay relevant. They were also doing a diversity focused campaign with like lots of different talent my age, you know. It was sort of this like rebellious little bit like um it just like a lot of key elements of the campaign were very much in alignment with the sort of artist that I am and the sort of portfolio I have. So I was like, who cares about age? Like they're literally telling the other two like middle-aged creatives to follow my creative lead so that it's all cohesive and I'm the one that's being hired for the key element of the campaign, which is the beauty stills. Like that is where my worth lies. Like my age is actually an asset to anybody on this campaign. So I was like, and that is sort of the argument that I made on that phone call to the producer. And I ended up getting my way. You know, I ended up getting the budget that I wanted because it was a global campaign. And like at first they were asking if they could do a rolling, like a rollout of release dates because obviously with a campaign this size, you're charging the usage rights of the images. So for them to use them for like a year or whatever, and they wanted to like have that clock run first only because they were releasing it nationwide first, so in the US first, and then like a couple months later worldwide. And they were asking like, well, can we like charge it like this and then charge it like this for the other half? And I was like, no, I don't do that, you know, like they were trying to negotiate down in terms of like, can we just do 6 months at first and stuff? And but like with a global rollout, with a global release, it is so hard to keep track of like how long these images are actually running. Like, I'm not gonna fly to New Delhi and check after a year if those images are still in the mall, you know? So I had to sort of broaden the usage right terms and charge accordingly. And that's sort of what I was also like talking about and stuff. So that's how I ended up landing on that number. I see you guys are going crazy in the comments. This is so cute. I get excited just listening. How badass. So badass. Get empowered ASAP and make them double their budget. Yes. No, seriously, like sit down and think about like what is the like what is the actual asset that you are being to them. So also I remember guys the moment where I actually got confirmed for the job. I think I was still in New York City and like I was at a cafe with two of my girlfriends and I got the email that I got the job and I started sobbing. And it was so fun that they were there to like witness that moment where I was like, I just landed a global campaign, the biggest job of my entire career. And like, guys, I didn't end up qualifying for unemployment while I was here in the United States. Like, I had a legal work visa, but like, I wasn't a permanent resident. So I like our entire industry basically shut down. Like, most young artists weren't working at all. And like, even the big names in our industry were like barely working. And I ended up living off of the money of those two commercial campaigns that I shot that year for the entire year, basically. Like that was my main income. Like the money I made off of this global campaign got me through the second half of 2020. So I don't know what I would have done without these jobs. Like somebody up there must have very much had me in their good graces. So, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know we're running out of time and this is such a long story. So the time finally rolls around when it's time to shoot this thing. I get to fly out with my first assistant. We get there like the evening before, and one of the PAs picked us up from the airport, drove us to our hotel, and then the next day was pre-light day. Sol says we need part 2 and 3. I know. Well, let's see how far we get within the next like 10 minutes. And yeah, maybe we should do a part 2 because there's so many. Oh my God, we're still so like halfway done with this story. The pre-light day was really interesting because the main seat of like the headquarters of this brand was in London. So we had like a 5-hour time difference and they were leaving the office at like 5 p.m. So I remember we arrived and we only had like the first half, like we got approved a full day pre-light, but we only got the first half of the day to actually pre-light and get the light approved, because then the clients that were like making the main calls on the campaign were leaving the office. So I remember we tested light and then we had them like on a live stream or something. Like all 3 of us artists would have to like go up onto this little like patio thing to like get on the call with the clients in London and show them what we did and then get feedback. And then we had like 2 hours maybe to make corrections and then get a second round of approval, which was new to me. It was also new to me that I hired 2 locals for my photo crew, which I just asked around for recommendations from people in my industry. Luckily, because I was a lighting tech for a long time, I know a lot of lighting tech, so I knew who to ask and who knows somebody in Minneapolis that we can hire. They ended up being great people. It wasn't just guys. It was also funny because we like the day we arrived on set, we had, so the camera, I wanted to shoot with a Hasselblad with a phase 1 back, which we had to have brought into Minneapolis because I think the rental houses in Minneapolis didn't have that combination of the like the year of Hasselblad that we needed, that was still that you could still attach to phase 1, because the newer Hasselblads, I think they're like not what's the word I'm looking for, like they don't match anymore, like you can't pair it with phase 1 anymore. So we had a guy like I'm trying to remember because my first assistant like organized this for me, that he like commuted into Minneapolis to bring us this camera to our hotel. So the night that we arrived, he came to our hotel to like drop off the camera. And I remember we both went down to the lobby to like retrieve it from him, and he automatically assumed that my first assistant, who was, a guy, that he was the photographer. This ended up happening to me quite a couple of times. Um, so yeah, he was surprised to find out that I was the photographer and that my first assistant was my assistant. A little bit sexist, it's a little disappointing, but hey ho. And then the next day when we got on set, I mean, mind you, with like 3 sets parallel, I think we ended up being like a crew of 80 people or something, like this, it was in one of those like hangar studios, not just like the photo studios, but more like those like industrial sort of like halls, the ones that like if you guys have ever seen like behind the scenes from like movie sets, we were in one of those sort of hangars. Is hangar the right word? Um, yeah, and we ended up having like 3 separate rooms, one for still life, one for video, and then one for product, and the models would go back and forth between video and still sets. First assistant I hired was twice my age and same deal. I know, right? But I think it happens. And when we arrived on that set, there was a PA that came up to us and he was like, are you guys assist like with the photography crew, or are you PAs? Like all of the PAs are like breakfast is over there and like your area is over there. And my assistant was like, they're the photographer. Which was also, the guy was like, I was like, it's cool, like it's fine. And I remember like the producer had asked like, oh, what does Sophie like to eat? And I think I said like, oh, I like vegan food, and like healthy snacks. Which like guys, this was the biggest job I've ever done. Like I didn't care about food, I just cared about like doing a good job. But I arrived and they had like, he was like, oh, I bought you all the food you like, and he handed me this like gigantic, like guys, like a Whole Foods bag like this size of like every vegan snack you could find in the place, and like a vegan burrito like this, like the size of my torso. And I was just like, oh, I mean, like, what a dream, right? What a privilege. But I was like, I'm just one person. Like, and most of the time when I'm working, like, I don't even have the mental capacity to eat anything. Like, at this point, I figured out that like baby food style food, like smoothies and stuff, is like that's the way to go for me, because it's like the only thing my body has capacity to digest, because I'm so hyper focused. Like, this is such a high pressure, like fast paced environment. But actually, speaking of high pace, like we arrived and me and my first assistant were like, all right, let's get set up. Cause like in New York City, everything is the first 2 hours of the day is like, it's crunch time. Like you got to be so on top of your game. You got to be awake by the time you arrive on set and stuff. So we would like start lugging shit back and forth and setting everything up. And the 2 locals that we had hired, they were like, what's happening? And then we looked around and everybody was just like, getting set up, saying hi to everybody, getting their coffee, and we were like, oh, we're not in New York City anymore. um, so that's sort of how that day started. We started getting set up, did the lighting test, got some feedback from the client. That was also interesting because the client, like I showed them the light that I had set, and they were like, it's a little too bright. And I was like, a little too bright, because I like had measured, the skin tones. It wasn't blown up and it wasn't underlit. Like there's this like a very small margin of like how bright you can push an image before you start losing definition in the red tones in the skin. So I was like, I know it's not too bright. And then I talked to my first assistant, he was like, I think what they mean is it's too contrasty. So that's interesting, because sometimes you'll get a client that's like, they don't know how to speak your language. They don't really know how to speak light. So they'll say something and then you have to just sort of guess at what they actually mean. So we ended up creating a softer light that they then really ended up loving. So thank God we got to sort of decipher what they actually meant, because that was a little bit like a tricky moment where it was like too bright. Um, yeah, so we had a pre-light day. It was interesting. It was also really cool for me because I think we got like for the pre-light day, we got half a day rate, I believe. Nope, I think we got the full day rate. I forget. I think for the 2 travel days, me and my first assistant got half day rates. And then for the pre-light as well as the actual shoot day, we got full day rates, which like is not that little. I think my day rate was like 2.7 or something. So it's very cool that like even on a pre-light day, I was getting paid the same as for the actual shoot day, and same for my assistant because I was like, we're putting in the hours regardless, you know? And even for a travel day, just to get on an airplane, to get paid like over 1.5K, it was like that. I mean, it makes sense because that is a full day of work that you're dedicating to like commute somewhere to do a job. But like, I was 25. That was like mind-boggling to me. Um, so I know we're running out of time. I don't know if I should just keep going. I think I will. So, I can wrap this up in like 5 to 10 minutes. And if you guys need to take off, like I said, the recording of these Rich Artist Fridays is always up on my YouTube channel. I just don't want to postpone the schedule that we have for next week because I wanted to pick back up what we did what we talked about last week, which was like how to build a relationship with clients and how to talk to clients. So we'll just wrap it up within the next like 5 to 10 minutes if you guys don't mind hanging with me. And if you have to go, then just watch the recording and watch the end of this story. Um, so we did pre-light, which was fun, and then I think on that day, I'm trying to remember what we did. I think, yes, my assistant and I got one of the PAs to drive us to the George Floyd Memorial, because that had happened like very, very briefly before we landed in the city. So we went and we looked at that. It was like the whole city was boarded up, like nothing was open, nothing was happening. I think we walked around downtown just a little bit, just to like, I've never been to Minneapolis, so we wanted to see some of it. But then, we went back to the hotel and I think we like had an early night because like the next day was the big shoot day. And I brought a little bit of skincare for myself, and we had separate rooms. So I sort of took the evening to just unwind. I think we like watched a movie, ordered room service, or like ordered in food or whatever. And like that was the cool part that I like my first assistant was my best friend at the time. So we just like hung out, which was like, I mean, that's amazing. You get to do that on somebody else's costs. And then the next morning we had an early call time. PA came to pick us up. I remember I like did like I was really into yoga at the time, so I like made sure that I woke up early enough to do a little yoga routine before the big day because I knew that I like yeah, the nerves were definitely going. They were definitely pumping. But I ended up telling myself that like instead of getting nervous and anxious about it, use the nerves for excitement. So like the night before, the morning of, I was just trying to get as excited as I possibly could and just revel in the gratitude of the fact that I got to do this, and also trust that like I'm there to do what I'm best at, which is be a photographer. And once I am standing behind the camera and it's all set up and it's go time, like it was so much fun. It was just the same as if I'm shooting, for my own portfolio, just a little bit larger scale with a couple more people standing behind you and a little bit of a bigger, more expensive camera. But the act itself doesn't change ever, no matter the circumstances. It feels the same. It's the same fun. I do the same sort of silly instructions in order to motivate my talent. Like I'm the same person. And the day went by like that, like once it's go time, it's just sort of you blink and it's almost over, so um it was so fun because we had a very tight time schedule with like we had 5 talents, and like you got like 5 minutes with the talent before talent needed to be over in video and stuff like that. And I remember the producer was walking back and forth between the 2 sets, and every time he would walk onto my set, he would be like, Sophie, how long do you need? And I'd be like 30 seconds, or like a minute and a half, and he was always impressed with the fact that we got the shot so quickly, and that I was also confident enough to be like, I got it, like you can leave, give me the next one. So that was really cool, you know, knowing that I was confident enough to um know my times really well and not hold up production, I guess, in the end. Um, Another interesting part that I forgot to talk about that I wanted to talk about real quick with the prep for the campaign was there was a moment where I was on a creative call with the producer and the two other creatives, and we had made our own creative deck slash mood boards as like sort of feedback round from the creative deck that we got handed by client. So like first you get shown what the client wants, and then you make your own creative deck to sort of talk like present your approach to the project that you got hired for, so that the client knows like, okay, we were understood, they're heading in the right direction, like their approach, we like it, we trust it. And the videographer, you know, he's a great artist, but he want like the creative deck for the beauty was very, very soft light, very, very minimal in terms of like nothing fancy, just something that like very much reflects true skin tones, because this was skincare. So this was all about the complexion of the model, all about what their skin looked like, you know, the vibrancy of their skin and also their skin tones. So my mood board was very, very much like just soft light and just focused on like an accurate reflection of the skin tones. Like I was using a phase one because I wanted to have like a camera that has the capacity to capture organic material in the most accurate ways, and like a Canon just wasn't going to cut it. And also, you know, like these were going to be like big printouts in store front windows and stuff like that. So I chose all of my equipment and all of my lighting approach according to what I thought was best fit for the campaign and what the client wanted and what the marketing agency needed in order to do their job, then to put, you know, there's going to be text on it and like a lot of other elements. And the videographer wanted to do something a little bit more fancy with light, sort of play with light and shadow. And he had pulled photos from my own website for his creative deck in order to be like, I love this approach. And I know that he said to me, I know that you know how to do this light really well. So he was basically trying to get his way in order to make his project more creative and more enticing visually, and was using my own images to convince me to change my creative approach. But I was hired as the lead creative on this whole campaign. The other two creatives were told to follow my creative lead. So I was that was a moment where I think, had I not been confident enough, I could have made a bad judgment call in terms of being like, yeah, I can try that, but because I was completely unprepared for that to happen, or for him to like do that, also in front of the producer, and I don't remember if the marketing team was on that call, but I remember in that moment being like, I think I said, I think it's I like that is a great creative approach, and I don't know if the client will be okay with maybe just doing that for video. I think with a lot of movement and a lot more like elements to play with in video, is I think it's something that might be easier for you to get away with on your creative end than me, because my images are still, and there's going to be text on it, and the client wants to put the focus on reflecting the complexion accurately. And if I start playing with shadow and light and have too much contrast on the talent's face, it's going to take away from the texture that the products that we're promoting, um, you know, how we can showcase them on the talent's face. So I don't think this approach is going to work on my end. And I think that pissed him off for sure. Because I think that was a little bit of a moment where he thought that because he was older and had more experience, that he could sort of bulldozer me into him doing what he wanted to do. Um, you know, but it happens. He was really lovely to me on set, and there was like no hard feelings between us, but it was definitely one of those moments where afterwards I was glad that I stood my ground and I didn't let him intimidate me. Soul says, please make a Rich Artist Friday on how to be politically correct on set. Have you guys ever seen those TikToks of like, how do I in corporate speak tell somebody to like mind their own business or something? I feel like I've gotten pretty good at this point, telling people to like fuck off without them realizing that that's what I'm doing every once in a while. Because like you got it every once in a while, you know? I would have been pissed and answered something rude to him. Yeah, in those moments, like you cannot let your ego get the better of you. You always have to save face because after the situation is over, the one thing that people will remember is how you reacted in the moment and what character came out. And that's something I learned through like being an assistant and a digitech, because those are such high pressure environments where like egos will blow up very quickly. And then afterwards, you're like, that was so unnecessary. I feel he had no right to be pissed because he had no right to even give that idea. I think he figured, might as well try and see if he gets away with it, which it's fine, like I'm not gonna blame him for it, but that was an interesting situation that came up. So we shot the campaign. It was over in a blink. And I remember after it was over, I was so relieved and so happy, where I was like, holy shit, I did it. I was like, holy shit, I just did that. And everybody was happy. Like usually when you rap, there's like everybody applauds. It's like, it's a rap, and everybody's like, yay. And then you start breaking down. So my assistants start breaking down. Obviously, we like back up the whole system, everything. And I was so elated and I was so relieved. I was like, holy crap, like I did it. Like my assistant and I were gonna go get a fancy dinner to celebrate and stuff like that. And so I start grabbing sandbags and lugging them and like helping everybody break down, because like up until like a few months prior, that was my job. Like I was that assistant that was like breaking everything down. And so I'm like, I might as well help. Like I'm not that tired. Like, like I know how to do this. Like this used to be my job too. Like I'm not too good to like do some physical labor too. And then my first assistant came up to me and he was like, Sophie, you're like freaking everybody out. Like like I think because I like it's so not normal for for the photographer to like start doing the assistant's job, and also like it's not my job in that moment, right? That they thought that I thought that they were doing their job too slowly and that they weren't working hard enough, that I started doing their job for them. So he was like, I know you don't want to right now, but you have to go sit down and pretend like you're doing work on your laptop. And I was like, that's so silly. I have two working hands and legs. Like, let me help them, And he was like, no. So I like sat in the corner and sulked for a moment. And I also like, I love sitting on the ground on photo sets because it grounds me. And like, when you guys meditate, like I like sitting on a hard surface. I like sitting with my legs crossed, and we only had like director's chairs. So I took my laptop and I sat like in the corner of my studio, like on the floor, and like two PAs came up to me and put chairs next to me or asked me if I wanted a chair. And my first assistant had to be like, they're fine. They just like sitting on the floor. um, so inspiring. I want to shoot my first global campaign too. You will. And my hope is that by hearing me talk about these experiences, you guys can sort of start visualizing this for yourself, because I don't think I would have landed there had I not watched so many other photographers do it and be on their sets, to the point where I was like, I know I can do this, and I know you guys can do this. But if you feel like it is such a coveted, unobtainable world to you, I think it's hard to get into the mindset to be confident enough to even go after these sort of opportunities. So that is the point of the story times. I want you guys to be able to play fly on the wall, learn from my experience, also just get entertained, because like how crazy of a job is this? Like this is not normal. And I forget that sometimes. And then my friends are like, Sophie, this is not normal. So this is so exciting for me to get to tell you guys these stories. I'm sure there's a bazillion things I missed in this story time. We ended up getting dinner, flying back the next day, and like we did it. Like it was amazing. If I, maybe we'll do another part two for this particular story. There's a bunch of others. So if you guys want more story times, like let me know, slide into my DMs and make sure that, if you ever want to have an exchange with me on these Search Artist Fridays, that you sign up via the Eventbrite, because then you can be in the Zoom. Like I am recording on Zoom right now, and hi in the chat to you here in the Zoom. But for story times, obviously, Instagram Live is great too. Next week we're doing what a photography client wants, because we talked about how to contact clients, how to get in contact with the right people in these big brands. Because like if you're talking to $1 billion brand, like how do you get in front of the right person that's going to be the one making the call to like which photographer is going to get hired? Now I want to talk about, well, how do you have that first call with a client where you sort of step away from this like desperate sales pitch that a lot of photographers do, and more understand like what does a client need to feel reassured and feel like they can trust you as also as a business owner, because your business is meeting their business. How do we speak their language? How do we start to understand like what they actually are looking for when it comes to their productions? Like how do you get your foot in the door with them being like, oh, I like that this artist felt like they really were taking the time to understand our needs, so they start trusting you in order like that you'd be able to cater to what they need when their next production comes along. So I want to talk about how to get into that mindset, because I think it makes these first couple of touching points when you do get to meet commercial clients so much easier, and builds a really solid foundation to stand on in these relationships with brands that hopefully maybe they don't just hire you for one project, but for maybe many, many, many. Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat real quick. Yes, I'd like to know, how did it proceed until you delivered the images? Jonathan says, this has been awesome. Thanks, Sophie. You guys are amazing. This was so much fun. I hope you enjoyed it. It was so fun to get to relive it as well, because I haven't told this story in a long time. So thank you for being here and for listening. If you want some one-on-one coaching, hit me up. My coaching consultations are for free. And just keep an eye out for the next story time that we do for Rich Artist Fridays. And I love you guys so, so, so much. And I will see you guys next week. Oh, I see a little heart. Thank you so much. Bye bye.